Her own family left the paralyzed alien, woman to die in a scrapyard, until one human found her.
The scrapyard stretched for kilometers, a dead zone on the edge of the industrial district. Under a pale, dust-heavy sky, thousands of dismantled starship hulls, stripped cargo haulers, and heaps of machinery sat in uneven rows. The air was dry and metallic, carrying the faint sting of oxidized steel and old ozone. Weak sunlight caught on shards of mirrored panels buried in the debris, sending sharp glints into the air. The wind rattled loose plating and sent fine trails of grit rolling over the ground. Darren Core stepped carefully along a narrow path between two mounds of broken transport shells. He carried a handheld inventory scanner in one gloved hand, a short pry bar in the other. His job was simple: record the identification codes on salvage pieces scheduled for an automated purge at the end of the week. It was tedious, solitary work, but it paid steadily and kept him away from crowded offices. At 36, he had no interest in being anyone's supervisor or in climbing into a job that came with politics. He preferred simple numbers, physical work, and the quiet of places other people avoided. The yard was supposed to be lifeless. His scanner's log showed no heat signatures except his own. That changed when he reached a collapsed engine cowling lying at an angle in the dirt. Something beneath it shifted, too slow to be machinery, too deliberate to be the wind. He stopped. The change in his breathing was immediate, slower, deeper. His eyes tracked every edge of the cowling for signs of movement. It wasn't unusual to find feral scavengers or injured workers sheltering here, but this motion was subtle. He approached, boots crunching against grit, and crouched low. The air under the cowling smelled faintly of dust and stale breath. He slipped the pry bar into a gap and pushed, bracing his weight. The metal groaned, but lifted just enough to let light inside. A face looked back at him. She was lying half-hidden in the shadow, her head resting against a strip of torn insulation. Her silver lavender hair was tangled with fine wires and fragments of copper, her skin the color of muted lilac under the dust. She wore what had once been a fitted travel dress, but the fabric was ripped along the thighs and shoulders. The garment clung to her hips and chest, but hung in strips where seams had torn. Her lower body was twisted unnaturally, legs motionless, the angle of her feet wrong. Her eyes, faintly glowing violet, locked onto him with guarded focus. Darren didn't move closer. "My name's Darren Core," he said, his voice kept level. It took her a moment to answer. "Ira," she replied, the syllables crisp despite the dryness in her throat. Then, flatly, "Leave the cover. The wind keeps the flies away." He slid the cowling back into place, propping it with a piece of pipe to keep it from dropping. He pulled the canteen from his pack and set it beside her hand. She didn't touch it immediately. Her gaze stayed on him, measuring. Then she lifted it, drinking short, careful sips. "How long have you been here?" he asked. "4 days." He looked at her legs again. "Any feeling?" "No." The answer came without hesitation, without self-pity. "Anyone looking for you?" "They were," she said, her tone tightening on the last word. "Not anymore." He understood the meaning without asking for details. Family, friends, whoever had been with her, they'd left. In a place like this, after a spinal injury, that was abandonment disguised as mercy. "I'm scheduled to log this zone for purge," Darren told her. 21st. Crushing sleds will clear everything. Her gaze sharpened. "That is 3 days. Less if they move the schedule forward." She went quiet. Her eyes drifted to the jagged sky above the cowling, and he could see her processing the facts without outward panic. Darren set his tools aside and knelt. He examined the skin along her thighs for signs of damage. There were bruises, some dark from impact, others yellowing from earlier pressure. No open wounds, no swelling that would suggest internal bleeding, but her body temperature felt low. He pulled a thermal sheet from his pack, cut it into long strips, and slid them under her with slow, deliberate movements, explaining each action before he made contact. She flinched when his hands brushed her hips, but held still. "You carry tools like a smuggler," she observed. "I count scrap for a living," he replied. Everything in this job is about making do with what's left. He set up a small shelter from scrap plating and an old cargo frame, creating a windbreak. A portable heat pack went under the fabric near her abdomen to keep her core warm. Then he mixed an electrolyte solution in his canteen and handed it to her. She drank again, a little more this time. He unwrapped a ration bar, broke it into small pieces, and offered one. She accepted, chewing slowly. When she'd eaten half, she stopped and gave him the rest. Enough for now. You'll need more if we move. If we move, you move me, she said, watching him closely. I will. You will not drag me. No. You will not sell me. No, Darren said, leaving it at that. Promises meant little until proven. He began assembling a makeshift sling using braided straps and part of a broken harness plate. Padding from torn seat cushions softened the edges. Every step, he spoke aloud before he acted. Not to narrate, but to give her the choice to stop him. When he finally lifted her from the dirt, her hands gripped the front of his jacket hard, the reflex of someone who didn't trust being carried. Her body was warm against his chest, her breath quick at first, then steadying. He lowered her into the sling, adjusted her hips to a neutral position, and secured the straps. Darren didn't rush. Moving through the scrapyard required patience. A wrong step on loose debris could send them both down. Ira stayed silent, except to warn him of slick metal or unstable piles ahead. Her awareness of the terrain made him adjust his opinion of her. She wasn't simply a helpless casualty. She was still thinking like someone responsible for her own survival. By the time they reached the perimeter fence, Darren's back burned from the weight. He set her down on a foam pad, drank water, then handed it to her. She took it, her eyes never leaving his face. You're not built for heavy work, she said. I'm built for finishing what I start, he answered. Beyond the fence, a service track led toward the trade district's outskirts. He checked her circulation again, massaging her thighs through the fabric with firm, even pressure. She tensed at first, then allowed it, watching his hands. My family told me a clinic would not waste credits on me, she said after a moment. Clinics waste nothing, Darren replied. People do. They said I could rest in the shade while they looked for help. She paused. They did not return. Darren didn't offer sympathy. You're not staying here, he said simply. When they reached his apartment, a small, single-room unit above a supply warehouse. The air inside was warm, smelling faintly of detergent and cooked grain. Tools hung in neat rows along one wall. He laid her on the low couch, switched on a portable heat lamp, and unpacked a first aid kit. I'm cleaning the bruises, then wrapping for support, he told her. She didn't respond, but she didn't stop him. When the work was done, he handed her clean clothes, a close-fitting shirt and a wrap skirt easy to adjust for her condition, and turned away while she changed. She moved more slowly than he expected, but when she was done, the change in her posture was immediate. They ate quietly, the sound of the vent fan filling the silence. Darren outlined his plan. Tomorrow, I'll get a brace. We'll try standing with support. No risks. Slow progress. Ira's eyes stayed on him. If you're lying, I will make you regret it. He met her stare without flinching. Good. Stay dangerous. Outside, the wind pressed against the walls. Inside, neither of them mentioned that the purge could come sooner than scheduled. Both knew without saying. Time was already shorter than they wanted. Dawn came in a thin gray line through the high window, and the room held the quiet of a place that had worked hard through the night. The vent humming steady again, the heat lamp ticking as it cooled. Ira awake before the light reached the floor and watching how the air shifted when Darren moved from the chair to the small counter. His motions precise and unhurried as he measured water, set a pot to warm, and checked the slate he had left on mute. And the change in his face when he saw the notice told her what he said next would cut into the plan they made. The board moved the purge forward, he said. It starts after midnight, not dawn. She didn't panic. Her breath stayed even. How many hours? 18. He met her eyes and didn't look away. We can still do this. We just have to start now. He brought a short commode chair from a closet and a folding screen he normally used for repairs that threw sparks, set both near the couch without commentary, and the simple, practical act answered questions she had held back all night out of caution and pride. She studied him, weighed the respect in the arrangement, then nodded once. "Thank you." He gave her the privacy she needed, then cleaned and rewrapped her hips with practiced hands, speaking before each touch. The pain was less sharp than the night before, but deeper in the joints. He adjusted support under her sacrum. Her shoulders released a fraction when the ache eased. He cooked a simple breakfast and split it with her, added a supplement to the tea because she needed protein and salt, and while they ate, he laid out what would happen next. "I know someone who keeps a few mobility rigs around from her clinic days," he said. "We worked the same docks in the bad years. She's retired. She won't ask for ID." Ira looked at the wrap skirt lying ready at the end of the couch and then at her legs. "How do we move without attention?" "Covered crate cart," he said. "I use it for heavy parts. Customs tags are mine. We go out the back and keep it ordinary." He pulled a clean V-neck top and the soft skirt he had given her the night before, then stepped away again so she could dress. She fought with the shirt and won, tied the skirt low to avoid pressure on the wraps. And when he came back, she had already braced herself on her elbows, ready to move. He slid his arms under her, warned before lifting, and the shift off the couch brought a rush of heat to her face that was not embarrassment, but anger at her body's refusal to respond. She kept her voice level. "I will carry what I can." "You already are," he said, and the way he said it put weight and dignity back where she needed it. The cart waited in the stairwell. He laid a folded blanket and foam pad inside, then lowered her in, securing 2 straps across her hips and waist. He draped a canvas cover over the top that looked like standard freight and left a gap for air and sight lines. She tested the straps with her hands, found no bite points, and settled. On the way down, he spoke in a calm voice that matched the motion of the wheels. "If anyone asks, I am delivering valve housings. If you need me to stop, say stop." "Stop means stop," she said, making sure he heard the rule as a boundary and not a courtesy. "Stop means stop," he repeated. The back streets at this hour belonged to warehouse crews and kitchen suppliers. No one looked twice at a man pushing a covered crate cart. Darren kept to routes with wide corners and few steps. Ira watched through the slit as the district opened and adjusted her breath when vibrations traveled up through the pad, and she counted turns to keep her mind clear, reviewing facts instead of fears. Cold weather raises spasticity. Wraps reduce shear. Hydration maintains blood pressure during transfers. The old training in her voice reminding her body that systems still answered to her if she used them correctly. Mara lived above a closed spinal rehab storefront that still had peeling letters on the glass. He parked the cart by a side entrance, keyed a code on a dated panel, and climbed the stairs with the measured speed of someone who did this often. A woman in her 60s with cropped iron hair and hands strong from a lifetime of work opened the door before he knocked twice. "You always bring me trouble," she said, tone dry and kind. Then she saw the cart, the gap in the canvas, and the eyes watching back. "And this trouble has a name." "Ira," Darren said. "Spinal trauma. For days. No distal sensation. Hips bruised. Stable vitals." Mara did not waste time on outrage. She slid the cart into the room and locked the door. "We talk after we work." The studio smelled like clean plastic and disinfectant. Racks of old braces and modular supports lined one wall, labeled by size and joint. A padded table stood clear in the center. Mara pulled on gloves and looked at Ira directly. "I touch nothing without your say. You're the one in charge of this body." "Understood." "Understood," Ira said, and some tightness in her shoulders eased because the rules matched the ones Darren had set without asking for credit. They transferred with 3 movements that Mara counted in a calm, even voice. Ira's hands clenched on Darren's forearms once when her lower back lit up with a hot, wrong signal. Then she managed her breath and gave a short nod to continue. Mara palpated along the iliac crest, sacrum, and lumbar spine. "Tender at L2, L3, she said. "Motor loss below. Some tone in the quads, none in the ankles. Good skin integrity thanks to clean wraps. We keep it that way." She set a low-profile pelvic binder for support, then pulled a modular exo support from a shelf, a light frame designed for industrial lift assist that she had adapted years ago for temporary mobility. "We use this as a standing aid only," she said. "No heroics, no stairs, no long walks. If you faint, we lower you and we stop." Agreed. Darren nodded, then waited, eyes on Ira. Agreed, Iris said. They fitted the waist cradle first, then thigh cuffs that locked without digging. Mara tested the balance with a light push. Darren stood close, but didn't crowd. We stand on 3, Mara said. You get what you can from your upper body. He gives the lift. You keep your eyes open and tell me if the world tilts. If it tilts, I tell you, Iris said, tone steady. Mara counted. On 3, Darren pulled under Ira's scapulae and waist while Mara guided the frame upright, and Ira rose to full height for the first time in days. Breath leaving her in a sharp exhale she did not expect, hands gripping the frame's sidebars, jaw rigid as waves of pins and hot pressure pulsed along nerves that had been starved for movement. She did not cry. She did not speak. She stood. Mara watched her face, then watched her feet. No load below the knees, she said. We keep weight in the frame. 10 seconds. 20. Now we sit. They lowered her in controlled steps. Ira's hands shook when they reached the table, from effort and from the shock of seeing the room from a height that matched her memory. Darren saw it and didn't say a word that would make it larger. He set water in her hand. She drank without argument. Can she walk? Darren asked. Not as a demand, but as a line item in a plan that had to be made. Not today, Mara said. But with this, she can stand and pivot. Short transfers with you bracing and the frame locked. At home, you build a rail along the wall at shoulder height. She will do weight shifts every hour when she's awake. Massage after. No hot baths. No soft chairs. You want a loaner frame and a modified commode. You can pay me when you can. She turned to Ira. Do you have a family contact who can be trusted? Ira's mouth set. No. The answer carried more content than the word, and Mara did not press. Then you two run on rules, she said. Rule 1, he tells you before he touches you. Rule 2, you tell him before you move. Rule 3, both of you say stop when stop is needed. She looked at Darren. You hold that line, or I take my things back. We hold it, he said. They practiced 2 more assisted stands. The second lasted longer. Ira learned the exhale that kept her steady at the top. Darren learned the hand placement that stabilized her pelvis without stealing her control. He noticed how her focus narrowed to a thin, hard point when she faced pain, and how that focus widened again when she found balance. And he respected both states without commenting on either. It changed the way he saw his role. He was not saving her. He was setting the conditions so she could choose to move. Mara packed the frame in a carrier and strapped a compact commode to the cart. She handed Darren a small case with a manual massager, barrier cream, and extra bandaging. You come back in 2 days, she said, if the purge lets you. If not, you message me for a home visit. I still have legs, and I know how to climb stairs. She rested her palm on Ira's shoulder, not a pat, a brief, firm contact between professionals. You are not a burden, she said. You are a patient today and a person always. You say that to yourself when the walls talk. Ira held her gaze. I will. They took a different route home to avoid a broken drain. On the way, Darren answered what she had not asked out loud. I left home at 19 because a planned accident took my brother's hand and the company called it non-compensable. I learned that systems ignore what they can. I keep lists and I do quiet work because it gets through more often than protests do. I am here because jobs like this end with numbers on a report and a line that says cleared. I wanted the real and to be a person standing in her own clothes. She absorbed it, not with sympathy, but with calibration. If you tell me I owe you my life, I will not stay, she said. I'm not keeping score, he said. I am keeping time. Back at the apartment, he mounted a pipe at shoulder height along the wall in the main room, fastened into studs, wrapped in grip tape, a straight rail that reached from the bed to the small galley. He showed her how the frame locked. He explained the pivot, the weight shift, the stance. They practiced a stand and a single pivot to the rail, then a sit. The first attempt shook her. The second found a rhythm. On the third, she looked at him with a quiet, contained pride that made his chest feel tight and useful in the same beat. He stepped back to give her space. She reached the rail and held her own weight for a count of 3. Enough, she said, calling stop before the tremor took her balance. He caught the frame as she returned to the couch. She closed her eyes and breathed until the color came back into her face. Practical concerns pressed in around the progress. He printed a plain set of clothes that fit better under the frame. He trimmed the skirt ties and stitched flat seams. He shifted his workbench to make room for the commode and screen. He set up a schedule grid on the wall with blocks for hydration, meals, meds, massage, and rest. She watched the grid take shape and felt both small and seen. The sense of being handled faded each time he asked permission and waited for her answer. It rebuilt when her body failed on a movement she wanted and she had to say stop again. She kept her voice steady each time. She said it to prove to herself it was control, not surrender. Near noon, a supply runner knocked to deliver parts Darren had ordered days ago. He answered the door without glancing back at her, trusting that she had the screen and the frame in place. The runner saw nothing unusual. When the door closed, Ira exhaled slowly and looked at the frame as if weighing herself in it. "My family left because they believed this would swallow all futures," she said. "They love quickly and fear slowly. They were not ready to carry both at once." Darren leaned against the counter. "Do you want me to write them?" "No," she said at once. Then, after a measured pause, "Later, I may want to tell them I stood." "Not today." In the afternoon, they started massage and pressure relief on a strict timer. He warmed his hands each round, used the manual massager for deeper work, and tracked her skin for any change. She kept him honest with short corrections when pressure wandered or speed dropped. The work drew them close for long minutes where breath and focus narrowed to the simple facts of touch and response, treatment and effect, and the quiet grew dense with things neither of them named because naming them would move the line they both needed to hold. When he finished a set, she pulled the blanket over her hips herself, a small act that felt large. At dusk, he stepped to the window and watched clouds build over the district. He weighed the purge schedule again and what they still needed to do before midnight, close the yard forever, not because they would be there, but because he knew Ira needed that closure clean in her head. "Do you want anything from the site?" he asked, turning back. "A keepsake, a thing to rename the place in your memory." She surprised herself by answering quickly. "The strip of insulation I used for a pillow," she said. "I chose it. It kept the heat off my skull. It did its job." He nodded. "We can get that before sunset if we go now and come straight back." She stared at the frame, then at the door and decided. "We go." They used the cart again for speed. The yard watched them with the same dead clarity as yesterday. Only now the silence felt temporary, as if the place was already bracing for the machines. At the cowling, he lifted the metal and she reached under with careful hands, feeling the texture of the torn insulation, recognizing the exact piece she had chosen, and when her fingers closed around it, she felt a private, steady satisfaction. It was not sentiment. It was ownership. She held it up. "This one." He bagged it, then took one last inventory scan for the log because he refused to leave a task half done even now, and that small habit grounded him when the larger work threatened to spill into feeling. Back home, the day ended with another stand and a longer pivot, both of them sweating from exertion, the room warm with the smell of effort and the small, clean odors of cloth and soap. He cooked a thicker stew. She ate more and asked a question that had hung between them since morning. "If the brace lets me stand, what is the mission after standing?" He answered without flourish. "Autonomy in the rooms you live in. Control of your day. We set goals we can measure. We don't chase miracles. We build function." She considered it, then gave him the same nod she had given the first cup of water in the yard. "Function," she said. "We will build that." Night settled with the sound of light rain on the window. He set his chair near the couch again and the extra blanket within reach. She set the strip of insulation on the table where she could see it when she woke. Before he turned down the lamp, she said one more thing, not as a gift but as a record. "When I stood today, I thought I would feel small for needing both of you to lift me. I did not. I felt tall again for the seconds I owned. That is the part one will remember if someone tries to make me into a story." He met her gaze. "No stories," he said. "Just days." He checked the purge alert once more, confirmed the new start time, and muted the slate again, and the two of them went to sleep in the same room with rules intact and a clear plan for the morning, the kind of plan that does not look brave from a distance but changes everything up close. The rain kept falling through the night, tapping against the single high window until the first pale light of morning cut across the wall. Darren woke early, the habit of years, and checked the purge schedule before anything else. No new updates. Midnight still marked the start, but he knew enough about the board's operations to understand schedules could shift without warning. He set the slate down and moved quietly, boiling water and checking the brace fittings on the table while Ira stirred under the blanket. Her eyes opened slowly, focusing on the ceiling before she turned her head toward him. "How long until midnight?" she asked. Her voice was steadier than yesterday, but not casual. She wanted the exact number. 16 hours, he said. "Plenty of time for what we need today." She pushed herself up on her elbows, testing her balance without him prompting. The movement wasn't smooth yet, but it was faster than before. Yesterday had been about standing and making her first pivot. Today he planned to answer questions she hadn't spoken aloud yet. How much she could do without him holding her, how far she could move in the frame, and what adjustments would make the apartment fully hers. He also needed to know something he'd avoided asking. What exactly had happened in the moments before her family left her under that cowling? Not for curiosity, for context. If he didn't understand the injury's origin, he couldn't plan the safest rehab. He brought over her clean clothes, helped her into the brace, and guided her to the wall rail. She gripped it with both hands, straightened with his support, and when she found her balance, he stepped back one pace, far enough to test her independence, close enough to catch her if she slipped. She held the position for a full 15 seconds before she shifted weight and took a controlled step toward the counter. Her jaw tightened with the effort. "How many more?" she asked. "2," he said. She took them without leaning too much on the frame, then stopped before the tremor in her thighs became unmanageable. They rested at the counter while he made breakfast. She watched him move, eyes narrowing slightly, not from suspicion but from cataloging the way he organized space. How the cooking tools hung in reach, how every item had a fixed place. "You've lived here a long time," she said. 8 years, he confirmed. Moved in when the docks shut down. Found steady work with the board after that. "What were you before inventory clerk?" The question was direct, not idle. "Portside freight runner," he answered. "I knew every cargo lane in the district. Then the companies consolidated routes, and the rest of us found other work." He could see she was weighing his answer against her own history. She'd said nothing about her life before the accident. "Ira," he said finally, his tone even. "How did it happen?" She didn't look away, didn't soften her voice. "Shuttle crash. We were running a short jump between stations when a cargo container came loose in the bay. I was nearest, got hit from behind. My crew moved me into the yard because the station medics wouldn't take someone without payment up front. My family told me they'd find a sponsor." She let the silence sit before finishing. They didn't. Darren didn't respond right away because the truth was simple and ugly. Leaving her was easier than facing the debt. When she'd eaten, he adjusted the brace for more forward support, then told her they were going out again. But this time, not to the scrapyard. There were 2 items she needed before the purge: a folding bed that sat low to the ground for safer transfers, and a set of grip pads for the floor. She agreed without argument, though she asked one question as he packed the cart. Why not wait until after the purge? He met her gaze. Because once the yard is cleared, every truck in the district will be moving parts, and the streets will be worse for you to cross. Today is cleaner. The trip to the surplus depot was slower than yesterday's visit to Mara's. Darren kept the cart steady over uneven ground, pausing when she told him she felt pressure in her hips. Inside the depot, he parked her where she could see the rows of equipment and asked her to choose for herself. She didn't rush. She looked over 3 models of low beds, ran her hands along the rails, tested the folding joints with her fingers. The one she picked was plain but solid, with no unnecessary parts that could catch the brace. He noticed she also inspected the grip pads for texture before nodding. Back home, he assembled the bed near the wall rail, moving the couch to make space. He explained how transfers would work from brace to bed and back. They practiced once, then again, until her movements were smoother. It was the first time since the accident she'd been able to lie down and get up without someone lifting her entirely. She didn't smile, but her breathing changed, slower, steadier. Midday brought a problem neither had anticipated. The rain had turned to a light mist, and the district's power grid was flickering. A short outage killed the vent fan, making the room stuffy. Darren opened the window a crack. Ira tensed at the sound of voices from the street below. "They'll see me," she said. "They'll see the frame." He shook his head. "They won't look twice. And if they do, it's just freight equipment." She watched the gap in the curtain for a moment, then let it go. In the afternoon, he set up a short indoor path between the wall rail and the counter for walking practice. This time, she managed 4 controlled steps before stopping. She was sweating hard, breathing through her teeth, but there was no panic, just focus. "You want to try again after you rest?" he asked. "Yes," she said immediately. Before evening, he addressed another unspoken question from the last 2 days, where she would sleep and whether she was staying. "The bed's yours," he told her plainly. "You stay as long as you want. No conditions." She studied him for a long moment, looking for what he wasn't saying. "If I stay, I help. Cooking, cleaning, something. We'll figure that out when you're ready," he said. "Right now, you focus on standing and walking." They closed the day with one last walk along the rail, the brace steady, her hands sure on the grip. At the end, she looked at him and said, "If we make it past tonight without trouble, tomorrow I start keeping my own schedule." He nodded. "Deal." When the lights dimmed for the district's night cycle, she set the strip of insulation by her bed again, exactly where she could see it if she woke in the dark. Darren locked the door, checked the weather, and set an alarm 2 hours before midnight. He didn't tell her, but he planned to be ready in case the purge started early. This time, when they settled, there was no tension in the quiet between them. Only the shared understanding that tomorrow would be different and that both of them were now committed to making it work. The alarm on Darren's slate buzzed at 2200, 2 hours before the scheduled purge. He shut it off quickly, not wanting the sound to jar Ira awake, but she was already turning toward him in the low light. "You expect trouble?" she asked, voice clear despite having been asleep. "I expect change," he said. "Schedules don't always hold." She pushed herself up on her elbows, watching as he checked the straps on her exo support brace and set the cart near the door. "We aren't going anywhere," she said. "Not unless the purge crew knocks." "The problem is they won't knock," Darren replied. "If they start early, the crushed sleds roll through the yard's perimeter without warning. The noise is enough to panic the locals, and that means crowded streets. Crowds mean slow movement." Her gaze flicked to the strip of insulation on her bedside table. "You want to be ready to move me." "I want to be ready to move us," he corrected. They didn't have to wait long. At 2243, the low mechanical hum of distant engines filtered through the window. It was too soon. Darren crossed the room and cracked the window, listening. The sound deepened, a vibration more than a tone, and he knew the sleds had started their approach from the east. That meant the yard work was ahead of schedule by more than an hour. He turned back. "We're leaving for Mara's," he said. "Top floor, no foot traffic, backup heat if the grid drops. Better to be there now than fighting through street push later." Ira swung her legs over the bedside, already reaching for the brace straps. She moved faster than he expected, not in haste, but in readiness. He steadied the frame while she fitted the cuffs, her fingers precise even with the tension in the room. "How far?" she asked. 7 blocks, he said. 2 with rail, 5 without. When they reached the first landing, the deep bass of the sled's engines was stronger. Darren adjusted the cart's cover to shield her from the damp air outside. "You good?" he asked. "Go," she said. The first 3 blocks went smoothly, the streets quiet except for the low thrum in the distance. But at the intersection near the old cable yard, the air shifted. The hum became a rumble underfoot, vibrating through the pavement. Ira gripped the cart's side rails. "They're closer," she said. "Yeah," Darren replied, eyes scanning for the smoothest path forward. That was when a half-dozen locals turned into the street ahead of them, carrying salvaged scrap on shoulder poles. They weren't hostile, but they filled the narrow lane, forcing Darren to slow. The gap between the crowd and the wall was narrow, too narrow for the cart. He made the decision in seconds. "We switched to the brace," he said. "You walk the rest." Her eyes widened, but she didn't argue. He pulled her up into a standing position, the brace locked tight, his arm firm around her waist for stability. The crowd barely glanced at them, but the noise of the sleds was swelling, and Darren knew each second mattered. They moved in short, deliberate steps, her grip strong on his forearm. The uneven cobblestones under her brace made each footfall a calculation, and he adjusted his own pace to match hers exactly. She didn't look down. Her eyes stayed on the route ahead, trusting his calls. "Left here," he said quietly. She obeyed without hesitation. By the time they reached Mara's block, the sled noise had become a constant undercurrent, like the street itself was alive. He pushed the door open and guided her inside. The warmth and stillness of the stairwell hit immediately, but the climb was still ahead of them. She surprised him again by refusing the cart. "I can take the stairs with the rail," she said. "You spot me." He wanted to argue for speed, but he saw in her expression that this was not stubbornness. It was calculation. If they had to leave in a hurry later, she needed to know she could manage stairs. The ascent was slow. She gripped the rail with both hands, shifted her weight, and lifted each leg in turn. Darren stayed half a step behind, ready to catch her. Twice she paused, catching her breath, and both times he matched her without urging her on. At Mara's door, she was sweating but upright. Mara opened immediately, taking in the brace, the set of Ira's jaw, and the low mechanical thrum outside. "You made the right call," she said, stepping aside. Inside, Darren helped Ira into a chair near the heater. She exhaled, her hands loosening on the armrests. "You didn't carry me this time," she said. "No," he agreed. "You carried yourself. I just kept you from falling." The noise outside was steady now, but no longer a threat. For the first time since they left the apartment, Darren let himself relax into the seat opposite her. She met his gaze, and something unspoken passed between them. Not relief exactly, but recognition. Both of them had learned something about what they could do together when the clock was running down. "Next time," she said, "we don't wait for the engines to start." He gave a short nod. "Next time, we move when the light changes." Morning light came in soft through Mara's east windows, spilling across the worn floorboards and catching in the dust motes that floated just above the heater. The sound of the purge sleds was gone. Only the faint hum of the district's morning traffic came through now. Ira was already awake when Darren came out from the small spare room Mara had given him for the night. She was seated in the exo support brace by the table, hands wrapped around a ceramic mug that steamed faintly. Mara sat across from her, drinking her own tea in unhurried sips. "You didn't wake me," Darren said. "You needed the sleep," Ira replied, her tone neutral, but her eyes following him in a way that suggested she'd been aware of every sound in the night. Mara's gaze moved between them before she set her cup down. "She's been up since first light," she said. "Already did her morning stretches and a 10-second stand without you hovering. I made sure she didn't push past that." Darren gave Ira a short nod. "Good." Ira tilted her head slightly. "Not going to say I'm impressed. You doing the work doesn't surprise me," he said. "It's expected." For a second she almost smiled, but she hid it in another sip of tea. Breakfast was plain, grain porridge and dried fruit, but it was hot and steady. Mara ate with them, then cleared her cup. "If you want my opinion," she said, "you should stay here until the frame becomes second nature. The apartment's fine, but up here you've got the railings, a clear floor, and someone to keep an eye on you when he's gone for work." Ira didn't answer immediately. She glanced at Darren. "You trust her?" "Yes," he said, "more than most." "Then I'll stay until I can do the stairs faster," she said, the decision landing without drama. Mara stood. "Good. Then we're training today. No heroics, just control." The morning session was the most deliberate work Ira had done yet. They started with seated balance drills, hands off the frame, using her core to keep steady. Then weight shifts while standing, the brace locked but her body doing more of the stabilizing. Mara corrected her form with short, precise instructions. Darren stayed close, but let Mara take the lead, learning as much as Ira did from watching. During a break, Ira asked him something he hadn't expected. Why didn't you just leave me in the yard? You said it wasn't charity, but you've never said what it was. He leaned on the back of a chair, choosing his words. Because I don't like the idea of something, or someone, being written off before it's true. And because I've been left behind before. Once was enough. She studied him. Who left you? My father. When I was 14. Not a dramatic story. He just didn't come back one day. My mother managed fine, but it was the first time I learned how fast people decide they're done with someone. Ira looked away for a moment, her fingers tightening on the frame's handle. Then you already know I might never walk the way I used to. Yes, he said, and it's still worth the work. They didn't speak for a while after that. The silence wasn't heavy, it was settled. By midday, Mara had Ira practicing short transfers without verbal cues, forcing her to read body position and balance on instinct. She succeeded in 3 out of 4 tries, which left her flushed but visibly pleased. When they stopped for lunch, Darren caught her watching him while he worked the latch on the frame. What? He asked. You've stopped looking at me like I'm about to break, she said. That's because you're proving you won't, he replied. The afternoon was quiet. Darren helped Mara repair a loose stair rail while Ira rested. When he came back in, she was asleep in the chair, head tilted slightly toward the light, her breathing even. He stood there longer than he meant to before moving to cover her legs with a blanket. She didn't stir, but her hand curled slightly over the edge of the frame as if acknowledging the contact. By evening, Mara had drawn up a simple weekly plan. Daily stands, transfers, and short rail walks, with rest days built in. You keep this up, she said, and in a month you'll be moving around that apartment without embracing every step. Ira traced a finger along the paper. Then we go back there in a month, she said, not asking. Darren met her eyes. If you're ready, yes. As the lights dimmed, she set the strip of insulation on the windowsill beside her bed. Darren saw her glance at it once before lying down. The look wasn't sentimental. It was a reminder. He understood that now. They ended the night in the same room again, the quiet between them easier than it had been in days. The purge was over, and for the first time since he'd found her, they were in a place where they could think about what came next without the sound of engines chasing them. The first week at Mara's passed without the urgency of deadlines, but it wasn't idle. Mara set a clear routine from the first morning. Stretches at dawn, supported standing before breakfast, short pivot transfers twice a day, and rail walks in the afternoon. Darren adjusted to the new rhythm quickly, learning when to step in and when to let Mara's voice carry the instructions. On the first day, Ira still needed his steadying arm for most rail walks. She moved in the brace with determination, but without fluidity, each step deliberate, her focus so narrow that she barely noticed the rest of the room. By the second day, her hands were lighter on the rail, her pace a fraction quicker. She started asking for one more attempt at the end of each session, a request Darren always agreed to without hesitation. Meals were plain but filling. Mara had a habit of sliding a plate toward Ira before Darren even sat down, making it clear she saw her as part of the household now. Ira ate without complaint, but paid attention to portions, asking for more on the third day for the first time since he'd met her. Darren caught the faint arch of Mara's brow at that, and the unspoken agreement between them. More appetite meant more strength returning. In the evenings, after Mara went to her small back room, Darren and Ira ended up sharing the main space in quiet ways. She'd sit in the brace at the table, legs extended, and watch as he cleaned tools or organized supplies. Sometimes she'd ask about an object, the origin of a tool, the purpose of a part, and his answers were short but exact. By the fourth evening, she no longer asked out of curiosity alone. You've kept some of these for years, she noted, even if they aren't useful anymore. Not yet useful, he corrected. She held his gaze for a moment, as if weighing whether that mindset applied to people too. Mara's training style was patient but firm, and she refused to indulge either pride or frustration. When Ira misstepped on the fifth day and almost lost her balance, Mara simply said, "Recover," in a tone that left no room for self-pity. Ira did, catching herself on the rail, exhaling sharply, then resetting for the next step. Darren was 2 paces away, ready to intervene, but she didn't look to him, And later, when they rested, she told him in a low voice, "I didn't need you that time." He only nodded, but she caught the small shift in his expression. By the 6th day, something in their exchanges had changed. The physical closeness, him bracing her hips during a pivot, her steadying her grip on his forearm, no longer carried the same edge of wariness. She leaned into his support without flinching now, and his hands adjusted her position with quiet confidence. Still, they didn't speak about it. The understanding stayed in the work. That night, the power flickered briefly during dinner. Darren got up to check the window, and when he came back, she had taken his chair and was drying the inside of his cup with a clean cloth. "Thought you didn't do kitchen work yet," he said. "I'm practicing being part of the room," she replied, as if it were a simple training exercise. But when he took the cup from her, their fingers brushed, and she didn't look away immediately this time. On the 7th day, Mara measured Ira's endurance. They timed her rail walk from one end of the room to the other, a stretch she hadn't attempted without pauses. She made it in one go, breathing hard but smiling, not broad but enough to shift her whole face. Mara marked the result on the training chart. "Next week, we start adding turns," she said. That evening, Darren offered to take her outside for the first time since Purge Night, just down the stairwell and into the small courtyard at the back of the building. She agreed without hesitation. The air was cooler than she remembered, carrying the faint smell of wet concrete and the metallic tang of rain still caught in the drains. They stood together in the quiet, her brace locked, his hand resting lightly on the frame's upper bar. She looked at the sky, pale and clouded, and said, "Feels different out here." "How?" he asked. "Not like the yard," she said. "I'm not waiting for something to happen. I'm just here." They stayed a few more minutes before heading back up. The climb was easier than before, her grip on the rail steady, her pace deliberate but unbroken. At the top, she didn't go straight to the chair. She stayed standing for a few extra breaths, looking at him, her expression unreadable. Then she sat, unfastened the brace, and leaned back. "You didn't think I'd make it this far this week, did you?" she said. "I thought you'd try," he answered. "I didn't know how much you'd get back this soon." "Neither did I," she admitted. When the lights dimmed for night cycle, she placed a strip of insulation on the table instead of the windowsill, directly between them. She didn't explain, and he didn't ask. The week had built something neither of them was rushing to define, but it was there now, solid enough to stand on. The 8th morning at Mara's began like the others. Tea on the table, brace ready, the air warm from the heater, but the rhythm shifted as soon as Ira stood for her first rail walk. Her left leg, which had been steady all week, dragged slightly on the first step. She paused, adjusted her grip, and tried again. The second step caught on the floor mat. Darren moved in, steadying her elbow. "Stop," Mara said from across the room. "I can fix it," Ira replied, her tone clipped. "You'll fix it by stopping," Mara said, walking over. "If you push now, you'll strain the hip and lose a week." The warning landed heavier than either of them expected. Ira looked at Darren, as if waiting for him to overrule it. He didn't. "Sit," he said. She lowered herself back into the chair, jaw set. For the rest of the morning, she was quieter. She went through the seated balance drills without complaint, but the focus was gone. By midday, when Darren suggested a short pivot transfer, she refused. "If I can't walk right today, I don't want to move at all." "It's a bad day," he said. "Not a bad pattern." "That's how it starts," she shot back. "One bad day, then another. Then you can't get it back." Mara left them alone after lunch, muttering something about errands. The room felt larger without her, and heavier. Darren stayed by the table, leaning on the back of a chair. "You think I brought you here to get perfect," he said. "You brought me here to move forward," she said. "Now I'm moving backward." He crossed to her slowly, crouched so his eyes were level with hers. "You're afraid this means you'll lose everything you've gained." She didn't answer. "It doesn't," he said. "But even if it did, I wouldn't walk away." That made her look at him sharply. "Why not? You've done your part. No one would expect you to keep doing this." "I'm not here because of what's expected," he said. "I'm here because I want to be." Her eyes searched his face for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its edge. "If I stay like this, if nothing improves, you'd still—" "Yes." He cut him before she could finish. They stayed like that for a few seconds before she looked down, pressing her palms into her thighs. "Then you're making this harder," she said. "Ow." "Because now it's not just about whether I can walk again. It's about whether I'm worth staying for." He didn't argue with the statement. Instead, he said, "Then let's make it about both." In the afternoon, she agreed to try again, not walking but supported standing. Darren locked the brace and stood close, one arm braced against the wall rail, the other ready at her waist. She rose slowly, the drag in her left leg still there, but she stayed upright for a full 30 seconds. He could feel her breath quicken, not from pain, but from holding the position with precision. When she sat again, she looked more in control than she had in the morning. That night, Mara returned to find them at the table, the tension from earlier replaced by a quiet focus. She glanced between them, but didn't comment. After dinner, Darren walked Ira to the window. Outside, the district was lit in a scatter of warm lights, the streets calm. "When we go back to your apartment," she said, "I don't want to go back as the same person you carried out of the yard." "You won't," he said. "That person's already gone." She was silent for a moment, then reached over and rested her hand lightly over his on the window rail. "Then don't let me go back alone." "You won't," he said again, and this time it wasn't a promise out of duty. It was a decision. They left Mara's flat on a clear morning, a week after the bad day that had nearly stopped Ira's training cold. The brace straps were secure, her hands steady on the frame's grips. She'd insisted on walking part of the way rather than riding the cart the whole distance, and Darren had agreed with one condition. She called stop before fatigue set in. The first 2 blocks were slow, but her steps were even. She kept her eyes forward, not on her legs. The rhythm of brace, step, shift was deliberate, controlled. Darren matched her pace without guiding, staying close enough that she could catch his arm if she needed to, but never reaching unless she asked. When they stopped for her to rest, she leaned lightly on the frame and looked at him. "Feels different," she said. "How?" he asked. "Last time I left with you, it was because I had no choice," she said. "This time, I'm choosing to." He didn't comment, but the faint lift at the corner of his mouth was enough. Back at his building, she took the stairs with both hands on the rail. Darren stayed one step behind, ready but not crowding her. The climb was deliberate, with short pauses to shift weight. At the top, she stopped and turned her head toward him. "You never saw me walk in here the first time," she said. "Now you do." Inside, the apartment looked different than the day they'd left for purge night. Darren had cleared the floor, mounted an extra wall rail along the main path from the bed to the kitchen, and replaced the couch with a low bed like the one at Mara's. A short table beside it already held a pitcher of water and her folded wrap skirt. She took in the changes slowly. "You planned this before you knew if I'd come back." "I planned it because I wanted you to have a choice," he said. She moved toward the bed, transferred from the brace with only a steadying touch from him, and sat for a moment, hands resting on her knees. "This feels mine," she said. "It is," he replied. The rest of the day was quiet. Darren unpacked the last of the supplies Mara had sent, while Ira explored the apartment on her own, short walks between rails, practicing pivots, testing where she could manage without bracing against the wall. He watched her without interfering, learning her new pace, the way she stopped to think through a movement before trying it. In the evening, they ate together at the small table. There was no talk of schedules or drills, just the sound of utensils and the faint hum from the vent. Partway through, she set her fork down and leaned back. "You said once you weren't keeping score," she said. "I'm not," he replied. "Then I will say this now, before we go any further. I'm not here because you carried me out of that yard. I'm here because I want to be." The statement landed with the same weight as any agreement they'd made during her training. He nodded once, not trying to stretch it into something softer. "Then we're even." After dinner, she insisted on doing the dishes from her chair. He let her, only stepping in to hand her the drying cloth. They worked side by side in the small space, moving easily around each other now. The air felt settled, like the place had already adjusted to holding 2 people instead of 1. When the lights dimmed for night cycle, she set the strip of insulation on the shelf above the bed. Darren noticed it was no longer within arm's reach, but still visible. "You're not keeping it beside you tonight?" he asked. "I don't need to," she said simply. He pulled the spare blanket from the closet, and set it at the foot of her bed. "I'll be here if you need anything," he said. She looked at him for a long moment. I know. It was the same tone she'd used when she'd finally trusted him to lift her in the yard. Direct, certain, without ceremony. The difference was that now, there was no distance in it. When they both turned in for the night, the apartment was quiet except for the steady hum of the vent. Outside, the district moved on, unaware of the change inside those walls. Ira lay back, her body tired but not defeated, and thought about the distance between where she'd been left and where she was now. Darren, in the small room next to hers, listened to the same quiet and knew she wasn't going anywhere unless she chose to, and that she'd already made that choice. For the first time since the scrapyard, they both slept without listening for the sound of engines. The story closed not with an escape, but with a return, two people in a room that now belonged to both of them, by decision rather than circumstance.